What is Azure AD Connect? When I have my users on-premise and I need to move them on the cloud, then I use a software called Azure AD Connect by Microsoft. It helps us to have a hybrid solution between an on-premise server and an Azure Active Directory. I have my test environment open over here with Windows Server 2016 running on a virtual machine, and I have created 4 users, which I will migrate to Microsoft Azure. Now, there are a couple of things to note before we move our users. We need to have an enterprise administrator. So I have made this user King an enterprise administrator. And if I go into member of, I can see that this user is an enterprise admin. Also, one more thing to note is my other users are just normal domain users. So what is Azure AD Connect? Azure AD Connect is an on-premise Microsoft application that is designed to meet and accomplish your hybrid identity goals. To install Microsoft Azure AD Connect, I just need to click this link and it will open up a download page. I click download and then my Azure AD Connect will start downloading. Once Azure AD Connect has been downloaded, you can copy the software into your on-premise server where you would like to migrate your users from. Before I start migration, I would like to take you to my portal and I have created one user called Chris Green, who is a global administrator. If I look into his assigned roles, I shall see that he is a global administrator. So I have one global administrator for my Azure portal, and I have one enterprise administrator for my on-premise server. Before we start migrating our users onto the cloud, we need to take into consideration a couple of things. The first thing to take into consideration is your domain. Now, I have created a domain which is a non-routable domain. What does this mean? This means that my user currently, if I go to his properties and if I go to his accounts tab, you can see that my user is on a local non-routable domain, means this is not on the internet. At on-premise.local is not published anywhere on the internet. So what Microsoft does is, if I have an on-premise.local user, the AD Connect software will migrate this user onto the cloud, but with the suffix .onmicrosoft.com. Let me open an article over here that says, if you currently use a .local domain for your users in Active Directory domain services, it's recommended that you change them to use a verified domain, such as pilla@consodo.com, in order to properly synchronize with Microsoft 365 domain. Now, if you don't have a domain and you would just like to use .local, what it will do is it will go ahead and synchronize your user, but with an .onmicrosoft.com domain. Now, how do we change this non-routable domain into a routable domain? We would go into Active Directory Domains and Trusts, would right-click Domains and Trusts, go into Properties, and over here you can add the domain that you have purchased. I have purchased kzcclabs.com, and hence I have added it over here already. And that is why you can see it in the Properties tab of my user. Previously it was onprem.local, and now I can change it to kzcclabs.com. Now let's say I have 100 users that I need to change the suffix. What I would do is I would run a PowerShell script that would change all my remaining users from .onprem into KZCC Labs. So let's see how we can do that. I shall put this PowerShell command in the description as well. This command, what it does, it gets the user principal name with the suffix .onprem.local and then converts it into kzcclabs.com. So you would have to change two values over here. You would have to put in your non-routable domain and your routable domain to change all your users UPN suffix. So let's copy this command. Let's open up a PowerShell in administrator mode. And let's run this command. So now you can see that my command has run successfully. Let's refresh. And let's double check that my user has transferred from on-premise to KZCC Labs. Let's confirm with another user. And you can see that this user's suffix has also changed. Great. So now we have verified that our suffix has changed. We have an enterprise administrator called King, and we have a global administrator called Chris Green. So 3 prerequisites that we have taken care of. If I go into my Active Directory and I see my groups, I have only 2 groups currently. And if I go into my users, I have a total of 3 users. Now let's go and do one more thing before we start. We will go into Active Directory users and computers, and we will click on View and click on Advanced Features. Now with Advanced Features, you get a lot more options that you would get without Advanced Features. So if I go into Properties, now you'll see that there are a few more tabs. Let's go into Attribute Editor, scroll all the way down to User Principal Name, which is UPN. There's my user principal name, and I can confirm that my user principal name now is skirton.sklurton@kzcclabs.com. Great. Now let's run the Azure AD Connect software. We would click Agree and Continue. And you have 2 options here. You would either use the extra settings, and over here you would have to enter your Azure AD Global Administrator. I would have to put Chris Green's user over here and his password and click Next. And this would just do an express transfer from your on-premise into cloud. We will go into Customize because we want to customize a few settings. And we would leave all of this as is because I don't have an SQL server. I don't want to change the custom installation location. I don't want to use a service account and so on. Since this is a fresh installation, I shall go and click Install. And now it will go and install. Once the initial setup is done, it takes you to a user sign-in options. The next step would be to decide how the user is going to sign in. The most common method that is used is the password hash synchronization. I would select password hash synchronization, and I would also like to enable single sign-on. This option enables users on the corporate network to get a single sign-on experience when accessing cloud services from their domain join desktop machines. So the user would only have to sign in once on his domain join machine, and then he could access all the corporate services that are there under the single sign-on. Click Next. Now I would enter an Azure Active Directory Global Administrator and click Next. So the next step would be to connect your directories. Let's click on Add Directory, and over here I would put in my Enterprise Administrator details and put in my password Now you can see that my domain is configured. It will retrieve the directory schema for on-premise.local, and over here I can add my users with kzcclabs.com. So any user that is still on the on-premise.local suffix will be migrated onto the on Microsoft.com suffix. So continue without matching all UPN suffixes to verified domains. There is an option over here to change the attribute which you would like to use as the Azure AD username. I would leave that as default as my user principal name, but you can change it to a different attribute. And how do you get these attributes? You would get these attributes through properties of the user into the attribute editor, which I did get after clicking on advanced features. So if I go back into my user and if I scroll all the way down to my user principal name, so I will use this name as my Azure AD username. Click next. I would like to sync all domains and OUs, but if you would like to sync selected domains and OUs, you can do that, but I shall leave it as all domains for this example and click next. Leave this at default. Users are represented only across all directories and click next. Synchronize all users and devices. Yes, I would like to do that. Or you can just synchronize a group. Some optional features which you can select is password write back. What password write back is, if you enable this option, password changes that originate with Azure AD will be written back to your on-premise directory, which means that if a user changes his password on the cloud, the password will automatically be updated on the on-premise server. If you like this option, you would select the option and click next. Single sign-on, we selected this option earlier and click next. So once all your settings have been selected and confirmed, you can click install to start the installation procedure. There are two options before you do that. One option is you start the synchronization process and all your users will automatically be migrated onto the cloud, or you can set up a staging mode. When this is selected, synchronizations will not export any data to AD or Azure AD. It's just like a test mode. Right now, I would like to synchronize my users from my on-premise server into the cloud. Let's click on install. And now it is configuring my synchronization service. I shall pause this video and come back once it's completed. After a couple of minutes, my configuration has been completed. I can now log into my Azure portal and verify that my user accounts from my local directory have been created. Let's go into my Azure AD. Go into users. And currently, I have one on-premise directory synchronization service account. This account is used to migrate your users from your on-premise into the cloud. We shall wait for other users to be synchronized. So let's click on refresh. And now you can see that my users that were on-premise have come into the cloud with the suffix kzcclabs.com. And to verify that this is an on-premise user, we can see that it has a yes next to its name. Chris Green has no, because this was my user that was created on the cloud. But my users that was synced from my on-premise have yes in the on-premise sync enabled. Let's go into Active Directory groups, and we can see that now we have 5 other groups that were created. If I go into my Windows Server and if I go into my groups, I can see that these groups have been synchronized as well onto my cloud. I would also like to show you the synchronization service that takes place on the on-premise server. Here I am on my on-premise server, and I click on Azure AD Connect and click on synchronization service. And over here, I can see that my operations have been successfully completed a minute ago. If there are any issues with your synchronization service, you can always come to this software and you can check if your synchronization is successful or not. So I hope you like this video, and I'll see you in my next video.